I, a 35-year-old woman, have been married to my husband, a 41-year-old man, for 5 years, and we've been together for 8. We both struggle with anxiety and depression in different ways. His depression was internalized and took the form of self-loathing, and he struggled with being suicidal. He even made an attempt before we met. I knew this about him and accepted him, even though it's terrifying to love someone who doesn't necessarily enjoy being alive. I fell in love with him because he's very intelligent, has a great sense of humor, and even though he's an overthinking, indecisive type of person, he was never unsure about me or his feelings for me. He was consistent, thoughtful, and went out of his way to make me feel special. I myself have codependency issues, and I was surprised to be in a relationship where someone cared about my feelings instead of me constantly being the giver, because I only felt valuable as a person if I was useful to them. I was a fixer, seeing the potential in other dysfunctional people. My husband was the first relationship after I realized I did this, and the first where I didn't feel the need to do that. We fell for each other quickly, and we moved in together after around 9 months. When we moved in, our intimacy life started having issues at that time because, ironically, my husband lacked the self-confidence to perform. One time I mentioned to him that we'd been having less intimacy, and he became defensive and said, "Well, you could initiate too. Why is it all on me?" I told him the various ways I'd tried to initiate, and he said, "Why do all those things need to lead to intimacy?" It was like pulling teeth to get him to actually talk about how he was feeling. Things would ebb and flow, always according to his mood and how he was feeling about himself at the time. It was never about me, and I think that was the biggest struggle, that he was constantly thinking about how he was coming off and worrying about how I was going to perceive him, instead of focusing on me and how he feels about me. Right after we got married, the pandemic happened, and my husband became an alcoholic. For 2 years, it was extremely difficult, and I was very close to leaving. The self-centeredness persisted in a new way, and he became very much like his mom, who is also an alcoholic, very much a victim of the world, who blamed his shortcomings on others out of shame. At first, I was devastated, but I learned to lovingly detach and just hoped he'd get it together. Eventually, he realized how much of an issue the drinking was, and he became sober and sought help from an addictions counselor that I helped him find. During his 2 years of continued sobriety, he worked a lot on himself. We didn't have intimacy for about 3 months when he began his journey because he wanted to make sure he could stick to it, which was understandable. I was so excited to have my husband back, and I'm still very grateful for that. He gained more confidence in himself and is no longer suicidal. However, ever since then, he's told me that he doesn't feel as emotionally connected to me. He says that we have more stressful emotional interactions than positive ones, but I see it differently, even despite our intimacy issues. Our cycle is, I'm the only person to initiate conversations about our marriage. I might tell him something that I want, for example, more intimacy, planning more dates, or more verbal appreciation, or how something made me feel. For instance, I feel unwanted and rejected when he doesn't want to initiate intimacy with me. And I want to know that he acknowledges and appreciates the efforts I went through to support him when he was drinking. He becomes defensive, saying things like, "Nothing I do is ever good enough, and I can't make you happy. You're attacking me and telling me that I don't appreciate you, but I do. I do those things you're asking, and you just don't notice." When talking about my own feelings independent of our marriage, he's much more supportive and empathetic. But if he's involved in any way, he feels he has to protect himself from any blame, perceived or real. In the past, he would internalize blame and feel like a bad person, at which point the focus would shift to his feelings about himself, and we wouldn't talk about what I brought up. Now, after therapy, he deflects and tells me, "I can't control how you perceive things," and tries to clarify what can only be a misunderstanding on my part. I tell him that stating his intentions without validating my feelings first is dismissive and hurtful. He thinks that if he can just clarify to me what he meant, that maybe I won't be hurt by what he said or did, and if I still am, he gets frustrated. If you drop a plate by accident, it's still broken. You can't fix it with good intentions. It feels like such a simple concept to grasp, and I almost feel like he's confusing me by not getting it, given his history and need for validation of his own feelings. Now, to add, we've had more talks than I can count about what our hang-ups are with intimacy, and me trying to understand what changed where he doesn't feel connected to me. He suggested things that I could do differently, sexy outfits, blindfolds, that kind of thing. I did them all, but nothing changed. He even tried to blame his lack of desire on my lack of self-confidence, from the literal years of hot and cold behavior and rejection. Then, he informed me that he's basically friend-zoned me in his head so that he doesn't resent me for our dynamic, but he still let me make a fool of myself trying all of his ideas when he knew he'd already disconnected. This was unbelievably hurtful, and while he takes accountability for the fact that he should have said something sooner, he refuses to apologize for the damage all of this has caused to my self-esteem. He says that self-confidence comes from within, as if I shouldn't be affected by this. I told him that he lacked empathy and that I'm affected by it because I care very much about what he thinks. Can you just say or do whatever you want to people and blame them for being hurt because they're the ones who allowed themselves to be affected? Where's the line? I feel like he's taken his self-improvement journey to the extreme, and his newfound ability to not take things personally has disconnected him from being emotionally intimate with anyone. He's found confidence in himself, and now he thinks that everyone else should be as unaffected by the actions of others as he is. He also has a personality trait of focusing on the negatives in regular life, and I think he doesn't see the good things that he loved about me because he magnifies the problems instead. For example, he once claimed that I wasn't supportive because of one time years ago that I didn't think he'd follow through with using all the exercise equipment that he bought, but didn't acknowledge the 2 years I stood by him and believed he could quit drinking until I pointed it out. There was once a time where he appreciated my unrelenting optimism. I'm at a loss on how to approach a man who says he wants to be closer to me and loves me, but has made himself an island and doesn't want to see or take accountability for how his behavior has increased the emotional distance between us. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Head to therapy. Alone, not with him. He weaponized his individual therapy, and he will weaponize couples counseling. Go on your own. Your husband right now is a hypocrite. He is deeply and profoundly affected by even a hint of you having an opinion about him that he isn't comfortable with. He has not learned to not take things personally, not with you. Every interaction here is him taking everything you say deeply personally. So personally, he can't practice basic empathy with you. He has learned to badger and debate you until he feels justified not having to reflect on himself. That is not the same thing. He's not just refusing to take accountability for his actions and how much work he invents for you when he refuses to acknowledge his words and his actions don't add up. He's refusing to practice the kind of basic human empathy and mutual understanding that makes relationships possible. You need to figure out ways of saying, a husband who has chosen to friend zone me is unacceptable to me, and this is not a marriage I will remain in, and meaning it. A husband who seeks compliance with his perspective instead of understanding mine is not acceptable to me, and not a marriage I will remain in. Comment 2. You can't make him acknowledge anything, and there are no words you can use to make him see your point of view because he doesn't want to. You can accept that and end your marriage, or you can accept that and still stay with him. But if you continue talking about this, you will realize you just go round and round in circles. Your husband is working hard to maintain the relationship at a level where he's comfortable, and he is in control of how things go. If you drop the rope of trying to have equal consideration, it won't change him, but you'll stop wasting your energy and might get some mental space to see things more clearly. Now, for the update. I'm back with an update. A week after my last post, I decided to try and lighten the mood by planning a family dinner. I invited my husband, my parents, and my younger sister over. I thought maybe having everyone around would help him snap out of whatever funk he's been in. So, we had the dinner at our place, and I made a homemade lasagna and a chocolate cake for dessert. I was really hoping it would be a hit because I put in the effort, you know? But throughout the entire dinner, my husband just seemed so distracted. He kept looking at his phone, like a lot. My parents and my sister were trying to talk about light stuff, but he was just completely unresponsive. My sister, who's a college student, mentioned her recent breakup. That led to some awkward silence. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but it was like talking to a wall with him. After dinner, while I was clearing the table, I overheard my husband speaking quietly on the phone in another room. I couldn't help but catch snippets of what he was saying, like "I can't keep doing this," and "I need space." I started to approach the room, but then he suddenly ended the call and walked out. He looked flustered, and I just knew something wasn't right. Later that night, I found him scrolling through old pictures of his ex-girlfriend. Yeah, his ex. One he had never mentioned before. I asked him about the pictures. He just brushed me off, claiming they were just memories. I was so annoyed by his lack of engagement. I confronted him about his phone call and the photos. That's when he snapped back, saying I always jump to conclusions without knowing the full story. The conversation escalated into a heated argument, with him accusing me of being insecure. I pointed out that he's the one who's been distant and cold since his recovery. He stormed out to the garage to cool off, leaving me frustrated in the kitchen. The next day, I made a decision I know I shouldn't have. I decided to check his phone while he was in the shower. I know, but I just had to. I found texts from a woman he used to work with. They were discussing personal matters and plans to meet up. The texts were flirty in nature, using inside jokes and emojis. They made my heart race in a way I didn't want it to. When my husband came out of the shower, I confronted him with the evidence. He tried to downplay it, claiming it's just friendly banter and that I'm overreacting. I insisted it was inappropriate and demanded to know if he had been meeting her. He hesitated, then admitted they met for coffee once, claiming it was just to catch up. He argued that he's been trying to improve himself and that I'm the one pushing him away. I left the room, feeling overwhelmed, and decided to visit my parents for a few days. At my parents' house, I shared everything that happened, and they expressed their concern for my well-being. After a few days, I returned home and found my husband waiting, looking all nervous. He apologized for his actions, but I felt like the damage has been done. We sat down to talk, but it quickly devolved into another argument about trust and commitment. He pleaded with me, claiming he would change, but I felt like it was too late for promises. I moved to a temporary place with my sister, and that's where I am now. Edit. After reading the responses to my last post, I realized that I overlooked some important details. I want to clarify that my husband's ex is not the same person he's been in contact with. I found texts from a different woman whom he has been talking to for the past few months. The conversations were definitely flirtatious. My husband claims they are just friends, but I can't shake off that feeling. He also expressed that he's been feeling lonely, and that has led to him connecting with this new person. I've been staying with my sister while figuring things out. Am I the idiot for confronting my husband about his drinking at a family barbecue after he got sober? I have been with my husband for 10 years. My husband battled with alcoholism from the time we met, but it was less noticeable because we were both young and partying a lot. It got worse after we got married because infection 19 hit right after our wedding, and it really upended our lives. Lockdown with him was hell, an actual nightmare. He lost his job immediately when his company laid off almost half their employees. He was drinking a 6-pack of beer and a liter of liquor each and every night, sometimes more. The financial toll alone made me sick to my stomach. He maxed out all 3 of our credit cards and wiped out our savings. When the money ran out between paychecks, he would run to his family or go over to their houses and raid their refrigerators and liquor cabinets. He would get jobs and then just not go until they fired him. He refused to file for unemployment. He slept all day and stayed up all night. He wouldn't do anything around the house or with me. On top of it, he was an hurtful jerk when he would get drunk. Never physically, but definitely verbally and emotionally. Yelling, punching walls, breaking furniture, cursing, berating, mocking me, threatening me, you name it. He asked for a divorce every time he didn't get his way, which always led me to give him his way because I got too tired to fight. And back then, I was spineless. It came to a head in the fall of 2022 when he was drunk and upset that I was avoiding him, so he asked for a divorce again. And I, much to his shock, agreed. I had reached my breaking point and just wanted the drunkard out of my house. He left for about a month. He would flip-flop between putting me down and starting fights via text to begging me not to leave him. One night, he came by to grab some of his stuff, and he saw I didn't have my rings on, and it hit him that I was absolutely serious about the divorce. He asked if there was anything he could do to change my mind. I exploded. I told him no, there was nothing he could do. I screamed at him about every horrible thing he had put me through over the entire course of our 2-year marriage. I chastised him until I made him cry, and then he apologized profusely, something he never would do in the past. But, to my utter surprise, he got and stayed sober. I couldn't believe it. For the first year, I was sure any day would be the day he'd relapse, and he never did. I kept looking at bank statements, looking for liquor store transactions or weird cash withdrawals. I would search the house looking for hidden bottles, but he didn't disappoint. He stayed sober. He said he didn't want to lose me, and I had made it clear if he ever relapsed, I would immediately end our marriage. Also, his family adores me, and none of them wanted him around if he was drinking either, and his parents straight up told him he would be making a huge mistake in losing me. He got and kept a new job. He made more money than ever. He apologized for everything multiple times. The man never apologized before. He's really tried to atone for his mistakes. We communicate much better. We make a great team. We enjoy each other's company. When we do fight, it's not scary anymore, and actually not really fighting. He gets along with our families better now. Things really are much better. Every aspect of our lives and relationship has improved. I feel like I have my best friend back, the man I met. No, he isn't perfect. I do wish he'd get medication and therapy. A previous therapist that he was seeing when we first started dating told him he's probably bipolar, but he's never been tested to confirm. Unfortunately, this therapist was a bit of a jerk, and my husband fired him and has refused to do any therapy, either individual or couples, but I am very proud of him and happy to be married to him. Recently, he's been getting his intimacy drive back. It was obliterated when he was drinking, but I'm struggling to want intimacy at all. I do want it occasionally, but it's maybe twice a month that I feel the desire. I never initiate because, to be honest, it feels like work to me. But I'm also discovering that maybe I am still holding on to some residual resentment from 2022. I've never been attacked or forced by my husband, but intimacy with him while he was an alcoholic was an absolute nightmare. He'd throw tantrums when I didn't want him to touch me because he was drunk and annoying. I always just went along with it to avoid a fight. But then he'd get mad that he couldn't perform. He'd get mad that I wasn't into it when he could perform. He would blame me for the erectile dysfunction and not being able to finish, which always spiraled into him blaming me for his drinking. I think it made me just disgusted by intimacy altogether, and in a way, traumatized me, not trying to sound dramatic. The last time we tried to talk about my lack of interest in intimacy, I told my husband that I guess maybe my intimacy issues could be caused by some residual resentment or trauma that I didn't realize I had, and he got upset saying, "I've apologized so many times. I've changed. I have worked so hard over the last 2 years to get us back to a good place to where you love and trust me and feel safe again. I still feel like you're holding this over my head. It makes me feel awful. I feel guilty. I'm sorry for what I did, but how long do I have to keep apologizing? What else do I need to do? What else do I need to say? What will make you want me again?" I felt bad because probably, this is a me problem, and I'm not giving this as much effort as he gave me in improving our marriage. So I told him I didn't know what he needed to do, if anything, because there's nothing I can think of that he hasn't done, and that I'll do some thinking, and I'm probably going to end up talking to someone, which brings me back to seeking therapy. Now for an update. I have a psychiatrist, and I've asked for her help getting me a therapist to talk to. Unfortunately, not many therapists take my insurance, and I cannot afford $150 to $300 out of pocket each session. That said, I also make too much to get copay or sliding scale assistance, so I'm currently in limbo. I just don't know what I can or should do in the meantime. Obviously, talking to him about it isn't working. He still feels very sorry and defensive and doesn't like talking about it. He has a lot of shame about how he used to be. Whenever he witnesses an alcoholic and their antics, he always has an, "Oh my God, that was me, wasn't it?" moment. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I'm really struck by a pattern where your husband is willing to participate in recovery and repair only as long as it never hurts his feelings. He won't see an individual therapist, a couples therapist, or a psychiatrist, an entirely different job, because he had a bad experience in therapy once. He won't talk with you about the very real intimacy trauma that he caused you because it makes him feel bad. He'll apologize, which I suspect makes him feel better as well, and he'll behave better and enjoy the accompanying rewards and praise, but he won't listen to you about how his behavior has had ripple effects that continue to harm you. Getting sober isn't nothing, but he's not doing everything he needs to do. Why does his comfort need to be protected, but you just need to get over the pain he caused? 2 years of abuse followed by 2 years of not harassing wouldn't be a long enough timeline for most people to get over what you suffered. Comment 2. Do you have an Al-Anon meeting in your area? Because that's a place where you can talk about this stuff with other people who have gone through the same, and it's free. I totally get that you're going to have residual resentment over his behavior, but you have chosen to stay married and really do need a way to start working through your feelings in the meantime. Also, though, I do give him serious concern that he's not interested in couples therapy at this point. Aside from the cost of therapy, he should be interested in doing whatever it takes to heal your relationship. The fact that he's sorry and defensive isn't a good sign either. Is he in any meetings? Because yes, there's shame, and also you have to do the work to get over your self-focus as a person who has done harm and work on healing things with the people you hurt. Have you ever heard of a dry drunk? Now for the update. 2 weeks after my last update, we went to a family barbecue at my parents' house for my dad's birthday. It was honestly a nice day. The weather was good, food was amazing, and my husband was in a good mood, laughing and joking with all the family. It was so different from how he used to be around them. Like, he used to be quiet and stay off to the side, not wanting to talk to anyone. He'd pretty much be sad just sitting there, and we all knew it was because he was drinking, but no one would say anything. So this change was great to see, even if I was still working through some stuff. Anyway, during the barbecue, my brother-in-law Mike made a joke about my husband's past drinking habits. He laughed it off, but I saw a quick flash of discomfort on his face. I know him too well. He tries to hide it, but I can always tell when something's bothering him. As the night went on, he started acting a bit too happy. I mean, he was still sober, but his reaction to that joke was on my mind, and he wasn't helping things by being so extra. Later that evening, I overheard my mom talking to a family friend about my husband's sobriety. They were praising him for his progress, which I love, but it was just so much going on. I felt myself getting tense. When my husband came inside, I confronted him about having a drink. I mean, he was acting all happy and stuff, and I just had to know. He insisted it was just one drink to celebrate my dad. I could tell other people were starting to notice us arguing, and it got awkward. My husband ended up storming off to the living room, so I followed him. He accused me of ruining the fun and being a buzzkill, which was just unfair. My brother Jake came in trying to mediate, but ended up taking my husband's side, saying everyone deserves a drink. I was over it. I decided to step outside for some fresh air. While I was outside, I got a text from a mutual acquaintance saying they were concerned about my husband's behavior at the barbecue. They saw him drinking at a local bar the previous week, and it raised alarms about his sobriety. I felt sick reading it. I went back inside, determined to confront my husband, but I found him laughing with Kate, my sister's friend. I called him out in front of the family, asking if he was truly sober or just pretending. His face went pale, and he stammered that he was fine, but the laughter faded from his voice. Honestly, you could hear a pin drop in that room. Everyone went quiet, not sure what to do. Kate backed away awkwardly, and Jake looked at me like I was crazy. My husband insisted he had been sober and that I was overreacting, but I pointed out the smell of alcohol on his breath. Then the family started to murmur among themselves, and you could feel the divide in the room. It escalated, and he accused me of not trusting him. I told him about the text. He got angry and said I was sabotaging his happiness and that I never believed in him. It was a lot. The night ended with him storming out to the car, and I followed him. We argued in the driveway. He demanded I stop treating him like a child. I told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions, not just for the family's sake. I refused to let his past dictate my future, and I was sticking to that. I didn't care what anyone else thought. Edit. After that night, my husband and I had several tough conversations. He admitted to feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to be perfect and thought having a drink would help him relax. He realized that my family's scrutiny was triggering his past issues with alcohol. We decided to take a step back from family gatherings for a while to focus on us. Therapy is helping me navigate my feelings, and I see small improvements in our intimacy. We're committed to this journey together. Am I the idiot for dumping my girlfriend after finding a hotel receipt in her bag? My girlfriend, who is 25 years old, and I, who am also 25 years old, have been arguing quite a bit lately. We've been together for 5 years and lived together. An example of when an argument starts is that she's very loud and always shouts at our dog to correct him instead of getting up to address him. This will evolve into her getting annoyed with him, so she will just yell at him. Move. Stop licking. Lay down. This goes on and on. So I'll say, hey, he just got fixed and hasn't been able to exercise. He's just really pent up. Could you please stop shouting at him? Cue explosions. She immediately says I'm being dramatic, that she wasn't shouting, and if I cared, then I would step in and address the dog or train him. He is trained, but she refused to take part in it, so he does not respect her, which is its own issue. She will then flip every type of argument and say that she's actually upset with me and leave me feeling like I have to apologize after I brought something to her attention. Her driving, she yells at me if I say one little thing. She spends all of her money, and lately, she has gone from splitting half the bills to me covering everything. If I bring up, hey, I just want to know where you're at financially because it's getting a bit hard to pay for everything, it leads to a definite argument, and somehow I'm led to apologize for something. I can't even check in with her nicely, with a caring tone, and say, hey, I've noticed you've been doing less and less of 4, and that you've been watching more TV than usual. Are you depressed or is anything wrong? Without her getting upset and saying I just insulted her, that she actually noticed I've done something less, she's annoyed and wants me to apologize. I know that's a delicate topic, but I swear I've approached that as best as anyone could. It still blows up in my face. It's wild. Our communication skills have always been polar opposites. She's from a family that just cursed at each other all day and acted friendly for dinner without addressing anything. My family brings problems immediately to the table and hashes them out. I just don't know what to do. This is truly an aspect of a relationship that I can't be a part of. She wants me to marry her soon, but me asking her to stop shouting at the dog first thing in the morning led her to say, I don't even know if I want to move into a new apartment with someone like you who is so manipulative, which is so frustrating. I guess my point in making this is that I need to know how to approach her to set my boundary and how to work on our relationship going forward. In 5 years, I have never had a single one of my issues towards her acknowledged, and I can't give any form of critique or criticism in a nice manner. I'm sure she doesn't sound great right now, but she has amazing qualities. It's just that when you point anything out to her, it's like she turns into this little angry demon, and my life is miserable for the day. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. She communicates the way her family does and doesn't know any other way. It isn't healthy for either of you. You can sit down with her and explain that the way you are communicating isn't working. that everything you say isn't a criticism, but an attempt to help, etc. But I doubt she's mature enough to hear that yet. She grew up in a house only knowing conflict and chaos, and you're the opposite. Likely one of the reasons she's with you, but also something she isn't seeing in herself. Comment 2. If she wants to have a healthy relationship with you and is willing to learn healthy relationship skills, I highly recommend reading The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work Together. If she is not interested in learning how to communicate in a healthy manner, then that means that her life goal is to have an unhealthy relationship, and therefore your life goals are incompatible, and it's better to part ways. Now, for the update. I'm back with an update on the situation with my girlfriend after the last argument about the dog and moving in together. So, about a month has passed since then, and things have gotten way worse between me and Olivia. We're arguing way more often, and the fights have gotten way more intense. Like, we're talking screaming matches where we say some pretty hurtful stuff. I've tried to talk to her about how we can fix things, but every time I bring it up, she just brushes me off and says I'm being dramatic. We went to a friend's birthday party together a few weeks ago, and that's where things really went crazy. At the party, Olivia spent a ton of time chatting with this guy from work. Honestly, it made me really uneasy. Like, I know she's allowed to talk to other people, but the way she was acting with him was just too much. I tried to get her attention and pull her away from the guy, but she just brushed me off and said she was just being friendly. I had a few drinks at the party, and I jokingly asked her if she was trying to make me jealous. I thought it would be a lighthearted joke, but she snapped back at me and accused me of being insecure and controlling. Of course, this turned into a huge argument right in front of our friends, which made everything super awkward. I ended up leaving the party early because I was so humiliated and frustrated. A few days after the party, we went to my parents' stasheling house for a family dinner. Everything was fine at first, but then during dinner, Olivia got a text and went outside to respond. She was out there for a really long time, and I started to get worried. So, I went to check on her, and when I found her, she was outside on the phone, laughing and talking a lot with someone. I don't know who she was talking to, but it didn't sit right with me. When I went back to the dinner table, my family noticed something was off with me and started questioning me about it. I tried to brush it off and said I was just tired, but the doubt started to grow in my mind. A week later, I was cleaning out Olivia's bag and found a receipt for a hotel stay. The receipt was dated for a weekend when I was out of town visiting my parents. I confronted Olivia about it, and she said it was a mistake and that she had a work event that weekend. But of course, this turned into another heated argument where she accused me of not trusting her. To try to smooth things over, we decided to go to a concert together. But at the concert, Olivia spent most of the night on her phone and completely ignored me. I confronted her about it during the concert, and we ended up getting into another public argument. After the concert, she just stormed off and left me alone in the parking lot. A few days after the concert, I overheard Olivia on a phone call talking about a possible promotion at work. I listened in because I was curious, and she was discussing plans that didn't include me. When I confronted her about it, we ended up having another fight where she accused me of ruining her career aspirations. We both needed some space, so we agreed to take a break from each other to think things through. But then a week later, I found out Olivia had gone on a weekend trip with her friends without telling me. When I confronted her about it, she snapped again and said I was being controlling. At that point, I knew we were done. So, we ended the relationship, but it felt like there were still a lot of unresolved issues. There was also a sense of betrayal on my end. That was pretty much it. Edit. Things have been rough since the breakup. I moved out and am living alone now. I started seeing a therapist to help with everything. I'm focusing on myself and getting back to normal. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.